In our last Environmental Corner episode, I ran through the basics of what global warming and climate change are. I'll do a brief 30-second recap on that today as well. But today, we're going to run through who says it's heating up and why the flying flapjack, a hiker, should even care about this stuff. Why would you, a hiker, or someone who just loves to go outside, want to care about climate change? I'm one of your hosts, Yeti Legs, and you're listening to the Yeti Walks into Basecamp podcast, a show for hikers, backpackers, thru hikers, tree huggers, and anyone who just loves to walk outside. Our goal with the show is easy: to make the outdoors more accessible to everyone by telling stories and talking to folks who provide advice, gear, and encouragement. We also want to bring information to you about conservation of the great outdoors, because without it, there wouldn't be much hiking, would there? Settle in for today's Environmental Corner episode, where we discuss more on global warming and how it might affect your next trek. What's going on, folks? So normally the last few Environmental Corner episodes, you've kind of just heard me talking. But today we have a guest on our show who's going to listen in just like Basecamp typically would, but she is neck deep in work right now in the film industry. So we have here with us today, Charlotte Royal, our lead editor. Charlotte, this is the first time you've been on the podcast. It's so great to have you here.
It is. Yeah. Thank you. I'm excited to get to join you.
How are you feeling about being on something that you've only worked on in the back end?
You know, it's interesting. I feel like I wasn't that nervous about it, but now that we're here and going, obviously it's not like a live interview, but now that we're here and going, it's a little nerve-wracking, a little bit.
Well, lucky for you, I'll be doing the majority of the talking today. The reason you're here, Charlotte, is one, to listen in and kind of like be the protagonist, I think. I need you to ask questions or insert commentary or ask for understanding wherever you think it might be helpful, because Marie is really good at doing that. And when it's just me reading off something that I've typed up, it could be a little boring sometimes, and I might just blow through information that doesn't make sense to some people. So thanks for being here, and thanks for taking on this role.
Thank you.
Okay. So in the intro, I promised a 30-second recap on what the heck climate change and global warming and all these things are. Here is that recap. The average global temperature is rising, also known as global warming. This is caused by the greenhouse effect and the greenhouse gases that cause that effect. Gases like carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, and so on. The burning of fossil fuels is known to be the largest contributor to those greenhouse gases. As the globe warms, this creates changes in regional and global climates, where climate is about the 30-year average or expected weather in a particular area. We see changes acutely as weather in areas that we live in and visit. Think extreme heat, unexpected weather events, and so on. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is who says it's actually warming, because you hear all these people say global warming and they're raising the red flag, but it's helpful to know what institutions are actually saying this and if they're valid institutions or not. So the answer is, for who's saying it's warming, a lot of people are, except for, of course, climate change deniers. For those who do say things are heating up, the examples that I like to use are NASA, the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization. According to NASA, we're experiencing more hot days, more hot months, more hot years, said Kate Calvin, NASA's chief scientist and senior climate advisor. We know that these increases in temperature are driven by greenhouse gas emissions and are impacting people and ecosystems around the world. According to the WMO, that's that World Meteorological Organization, the last 11 years have been the 11 hottest in recorded history. If that's not saying something, I don't know what else is.
I do have a quick question. Like, I feel like I've seen a lot of people say, oh, well, we're having all of these like snowstorms and ice storms. And like, so obviously global warming isn't happening because, you know, it was just snowing in Florida. Was that weeks or months ago? Like, I don't know what the like exact question here is that I'm trying to ask. But I guess, can you maybe elaborate a little bit on how that is still, like the fact that we're seeing like these freak snowstorms and like ice storms and things like that, how they are still contributing to the like climate change?
So the first thing I'm going to say is it is atypical to have a snowstorm in Florida. I mean, that right there is a dead giveaway. Yes, I'm a Georgia resident. I lived in Georgia for 32 years, and every once in a while we would have snow. It was very rare. And I can say 32 because 30 is kind of what you base an area's climate on, right? So over my life living in Georgia, 32 years, it was atypical to have snow and to have like really bad weather events, unless we're talking hurricanes, because we did have bad hurricane season. So now we're seeing a bit more erratic weather. They're getting a lot more snowstorms, it seems like. And then it's going to be super cold and then it goes hot. Things can still be typical of expected climate in a region or expected weather events in a region. Like we are still getting snowstorms in Colorado, although they might be a little bit more spread out. And the overall ambient temperature is still hotter than what it should be right now. We're still getting these weather events. But if you look at the trends, the trend is that since the Industrial Revolution, it's gotten hotter and hotter and hotter. And over the last few decades, it's exponentially gotten hotter. And I mean, the 11 last years have been the 11 hottest in recorded history. I think the thing with snowstorm in Florida, and I'm not an expert on this, I'm not a meteorologist or a climatologist. To speak a bit more on this topic, the Arctic polar vortex is a band of strong westerly winds that forms in the stratosphere, which is one of the parts of our atmosphere, between about 10 and 30 miles above the northern pole every winter. The winds enclose a large pool of extremely cold air. There's an even stronger polar vortex in the southern hemisphere, stratosphere, in its winter. The stronger the winds, the more the air inside is isolated from warmer latitudes and the colder it gets. The polar vortex is occasionally knocked off kilter when especially strong atmospheric waves in the troposphere, which is another part of our atmosphere, break upward into the stratosphere. So the troposphere is below the stratosphere. The vortex slows and it may wobble, slide off the pole, split into several lobes, or in the most extreme cases, temporarily reverse direction. Regardless of their flavor, these disruptions have one thing in common: a spike in polar stratosphere temperatures, which is why they're called sudden stratospheric warmings. Under the high-pressure ridges, warm air floods north into parts of the Arctic, often driving extreme melt, while polar air fills the low-pressure troughs, bringing wintry conditions further south than average, such as Florida in this case. The Arctic oscillation often slips into its negative phase. Most of the time when this happens, and it happens on average about every other year in the Arctic, some part of the mid-latitudes will ultimately experience a cold air outbreak. The disruption of the vortex encouraged the polar jet stream to become wavier for several weeks, and in combination with other weather patterns, created favorable conditions for a severe cold area outbreak in the central U.S. It's believed that these fluctuations in the polar vortex could be linked to global warming events, things like melting sea ice, a thawing Arctic, and so on. But it's difficult to tell because we've only been studying the stratosphere since about the 1950s. In fact, the changes in polar vortex stability have been a bit all over the place. In the 1990s, there was a strong polar vortex for years in a row, which meant that we didn't get this weird fluctuation and colder temperatures in the central and lower United States. But then in the late 1990s, it started back up at almost a bi-yearly basis. So we had this unstable polar vortex every other year. More study is required here to understand what causes these changes and what influences these cycles. This information is all according to NOAA.
I know in like up here in Washington for the last, at least 3 to 5 years, have been getting like pretty bad ice storms. And this year so far, it's April, so I don't think we're going to get anything, but we've had nothing. I think we had a couple days of some like light snow showers, but like zero ice, like accumulation. Yeah, just hardly any snow.
Which is bad for your water levels.
It is, yeah. And we've had crazy flooding. Yeah, I think it was December or January. We had the atmospheric river that came through and just destroyed communities here.
Didn't Stehekin flood?
I'm not 100% sure.
Turns out I was right. Yes, Stehekin did see horrible flooding in December 2025, with some reports stating that the Stehekin River crested 29 feet. In addition, the area suffered from large landslides following the Pioneer Fire in 2024. The result? Water rushing down charred mountainsides with hydrophobic debris, char from the fires, and a lack of vegetation consumed by those fires to stabilize the soil. So landslides occurred and created what was known as mass wasting events. That is according to the Seattle Times.
But I know like Leavenworth like flooded pretty badly.
Also in the PCT.
They had a whole like the roads that go out there. One of the roads like caved in by the river and it was like completely destroyed. I know the I-5 freeway here that, you know, connects all three, like Washington, Oregon, California, up near Bellingham going north. It's been like closed down for a couple of weeks because of a landslide. But I would not be surprised if the like heavy rains that we've had contributed to that.
I would say so. The weather we've been seeing is just not normal, right? And it's come on pretty quickly. It's the last couple of years that we've been seeing this crazy weather.
Yeah.
Let's see. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So climate models predict that as the world consumes even more fossil fuel, greenhouse gas concentrations will continue to rise, and Earth's average surface temperature will rise with them. Based on a range of plausible emission scenarios, average surface temperatures could rise between 2 degrees Celsius and 6 degrees Celsius by the end of the 21st century. And if you don't work in Celsius, that's quite a lot. So how does this affect us in our environment? What we're seeing is climate change through weird, crazy feedback loops. Humans are feeling the impact of global warming around the world as climate brings intense droughts, wildfires, and extreme storms with heavier rainfall. Talking a little bit about the flooding that you were just mentioning. Higher temperatures are altering ecosystems, forcing animals to migrate to cooler places to survive. So we're seeing things like the Arctic fox and the polar bear having a decreasing or a contracting home range, while other animals are able to go a bit further north in their possible viable habitat because things are getting a little bit warmer due to all these temperature changes. The impact of increased surface temperatures is significant in itself, but global warming will have additional far-reaching effects on the planet. Warming modifies rainfall patterns, amplifies coastal erosion, lengthens the growing season in some regions, melts ice caps and glaciers, and alters the ranges of some infectious diseases and insects as well. Some of these changes are already occurring now. The ocean's warming and glaciers, ice caps, and ice sheets are melting. This is causing sea levels to rise, creating flooding problems for many people who live on islands and in coastal communities. And to that, I'm just going to say that I've heard people talk about the concept of displacement, but we're also talking about snow and glaciers on land and snow on land and ice on land. And as that melts, that does eventually end up in the ocean. That's the end point of these water systems. To touch a little bit more on water displacement, there's a common misconception that sea level change comes only from ice attached to land and not from floating sea ice. Although that is mostly true, it turns out that there's an effect, even if it is minor. An often overlooked ingredient makes a significant difference here: saltiness. Various studies show that because floating ice is made of fresh water, it actually increases sea level slightly when it melts into the salty sea, unlike what happens in your water glass. A floating object, like an iceberg or other sea ice, displaces its own weight in water. But fresh water is less dense than salt water. So, when floating ice melts and becomes liquid, it takes up more volume than the seawater it displaced when it was ice, therefore raising sea level. This has about 3% the effect of grounded ice melt and raises sea level. This process becomes important when accounting for the total sea level rise. Obviously, if you've got a huge glacier that falls into the sea, that raises sea level more than floating ice shelf melting does. But it's not zero, and the reason why it's not zero speaks to the complexities of the system. The effect of water going into the ocean or fresh water going into the ocean is not just on sea level. It also changes the stratification. It also changes potentially the carbon dioxide uptake and the temperature trends. While their effects might be minimal, these floating bodies of ice still contribute about 0.04 inches or 1.1 millimeters to sea level between 1994 and 2017, and are important to understanding these changes accurately. If you only looked at the grounded ice change, you'd actually be underestimating the effect of the freshwater addition by about half. So understanding and keeping track of the floating ice bit is important for those direct effects and then also those small sea level effects. And that is according to an article from NASA. Corals have been a symbol of the consequences of a warm ocean. Many coral reefs, home to thousands of species of fish and other organisms, are dying. We're seeing the homogenization of species across the globe, meaning that we are losing diversity, and those species best fit for the rapidly warming climate will be able to maintain a foothold while others lose out. Think polar bears, Arctic fox again, and other Arctic species, but also species with a super refined niche, meaning like they can only live in a very specific place under specific requirements, like a pika. Did I see your hand?
It's really fast going back to the coral. By them being a symbol of consequences, you were saying that the warming oceans are causing them to die off, right? That was okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, the warming oceans and that warming also causes a change in pH. And these coral reefs have they have specific niches enable for them to thrive versus survive. And then once they've reached that point of just having to survive, if they get pushed further and further out of that niche, then that's when you start seeing these dying events or these bleachings. When coral becomes bleach, it's in essence dead. More recently, Colorado and other western states have received the lowest snowpack in recorded history, with ski resorts closing weeks to months earlier than previously recorded. This will also impact water management, especially as it relates to the Colorado River and states that rely on it. So we're recording this right now on April 1st. And I just got to say, we just had a rainstorm here at, a little bit over 8,000 feet in elevation, when typically in March, April, even into May, we're still getting snowstorms, even down here a lot. If you were to go and look at the Continental Divide behind me, just, 10 miles, you would see patches of snow and windswept, bare, rocky peaks. It's kind of a scary thing to see. And there are towns in Colorado already on water restrictions, such as Kremlin, Colorado, which sits right on the Colorado River, because they're being restricted on the amount of water that they can pull from the Colorado, because the Colorado is also used by several downstream states and even Mexico, which is just crazy to think about, isn't it? Even some other Midwestern states have seen recent issues too, like Nebraska. They just had the largest recorded fire in recent modern history. It was the Morrill Fire, which consumed 643,000 acres across 3 counties in western Nebraska, according to Nebraska Public Media. That fire has been 100% contained, but that is a massive swath of area to be burned.
Wow, how devastating, especially, all the wildlife that, lost its home. Ugh.
And I don't know if it was the Morrill Fire or one of the other fires, but one of the recent fires in Nebraska consumed a planted forest. And if it's planted, it's not naturally occurring there, but it was surviving. Who knows what that's going to look like now, if they're going to replant that or just let it be what it is. So I talked about all this other stuff, but on a hiker level, how does global warming and climate change affect us? And a lot of this is in my personal opinion based on information that I know, but here we go. For one, hotter temperatures mean that trails in desert or xeric areas, which are also dry areas, is a fancy word for dry, they become that much more difficult or impassable for hikers. The SoCal desert was hot for us back in 2022, and we started on March 6th. On March 20th of this year, in 2026, Winter Haven, California, which is about 120 miles east of Campo, the starting town for the PCT, was 112 degrees Fahrenheit towards the end of March, according to NASA. Areas also in Arizona have reached between 109 to 112 Fahrenheit as well. Both states are home to some of the most popular hiking treks around, including the PCT, the Arizona Trail, and even the Hayduke Trail. So these trails are becoming a bit more difficult to navigate and to even do because of water accessibility. Heat isn't just uncomfortable and dangerous due to heat exhaustion, dehydration, or things like that, but it also creates episodes of or a sustained drought in areas. Hikers need that water, and in areas that already experience scarce water availability, this means more time to fill water from low water sources, longer water carries, so more weight on your back, or you're having to do water caches or rely on trail angels to set those water caches out for you. And the worst case scenario here is just going without water until you finally come across some. But not only is that drought affecting hikers, directly. That drought also affects trees because it weakens their ability to fight off bug infestations, bacteria, and fungus. When trees die, they create new hazards for hikers, including deadfalls on trail, standing dead, which is kind of a huge risk on the Colorado Trail and the CDT, and it increases the total fuels available for fire danger. So we have all these things just compounding on one another, creating these really bad situations for hikers now and even in the future.
I would also think that like losing the trees, I mean, I would imagine trees are doing a lot to pull back some of the like greenhouse gases, like the carbon dioxide from the like atmosphere, and like kind of help cycle through that, right?
No, you're exactly right. Okay. Trees are one of the best sources of carbon sequestration. It means storing carbon. And they do that really well, especially below ground. So the majority of the carbon that they're storing is in the root systems and in the different soil horizons around those forests or those stands, or even just, bushlands or sagebrush. All this vegetation is storing carbon and pulling it in from our atmosphere or from the immediate areas. And that is a huge boon when trying to, mitigate the effects of climate change, because the greenhouse gases that we have in our atmosphere right now, depending on what gas they are and how long they've been there, they could be there for decades. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They could be there at least decades. And that's just talking about carbon dioxide. Here's some food for thought for you. Drought affects vegetation, right? Vegetated areas on trails are cooler for hikers, for wildlife, and watersheds alike. If drought persists and vegetation dies, doesn't that make things hotter all around? So again, kind of playing on that compounding effect. There's also issues with increased fire danger and snow on trails for hikers. More of everything I just covered increases the likelihood and severity of ignited fires. Fires kicked hundreds of hikers off the PCT whenever we did it in 2022, and we were just super lucky. We missed it by actually the northern terminus. We missed those fires kicking us off trail by a matter of a few hours. Fires may also completely alter the way and physical trail that hikers take on their treks in the future. Redlining, which you may not know what redlining is, so I'll explain it. Redlining is following the predetermined route for that trail on the map. And whenever you hop off of that red line, because on the maps, it's usually literally a red line. When you hop off of it, you're no longer redlining. And some people might say that if you're not redlining a trail, like we didn't on the PCT, we did a road walk around. They might say, if you're not redlining, then you're not actually hiking the trail. Hike your own hike, but either way, fires are going to change the way and the paths that hikers have to take on these trails in the future, especially trails in the West. Lastly, there's just the aesthetics of the trail. Beautiful, lush vistas and wildlife are something that make hikes or climbs worth the effort. As things become hotter and fires consume, those views and moments will be changed or stolen altogether. Hikers will never see the same vista that perhaps, Marie and I saw whenever we hiked the PCT or other trails, just like we didn't see things the way that they had naturally occurred before the fire whenever we actually did the trail. So I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's scary to think about.
You guys did your PCT hike it was 2022, right?
Uh-huh.
So that was after there was like a really big fire in the Columbia River Gorge in I want to say it was 2018. It was caused by a firework. It wasn't weather related, but I think Washington is considered to be like in a drought now. And I don't know like how long that's been, but like, I don't know if we were considered a drought in 2018 or beyond. But when you guys went through like 4 years after that fire, could you tell that a lot of the gorge areas like around Hood River and like Stevenson like area was like really severely burned?
We did go through a lot of burn zones in NorCal, Oregon, and some in Washington as well. But whenever we got a bit further north in Washington, we didn't see that many burned areas at that time until we got towards the northern terminus. But I do remember whenever we got engaged, our engagement trip was Bernier, and then we went to a winery in the Columbia River Valley. Those temperatures exceeded 100 degrees every single day. And that was June, August. So definitely your summer, but it was freaking hot over there and dry. Man, Washington depends on what side of the Cascades you're on, right?
Yeah. I was going to say the west side is generally, I mean, you rarely see 100-degree days, like maybe one or two a year. But I think this year we're projected to have a couple, unfortunately. So.
Oh, no. Save the wine, save the grapes.
Yeah. Oh gosh, because that's on the east side, so they're gonna get it even worse.
Dude, I know. I bet they're going to have barriers built up, like water walls, to save the vineyards.
Oh, I hope so. Because that's a huge wine region. I mean, obviously not as much as like Napa, but it seems like it rivals it to a degree.
Okay. Is everything checking out so far? You're tracking?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, Charlotte, for being on the episode, for sitting through my lecture today.
Thank you. Thank you for answering all my questions.
Yeah. And also thanks to the Fire Once Lost for always letting us use your epic track Appalachian Trail for intro and outro music. Thanks, Anders. We love you, man. If you want to hear any specific Environmental Corner topics discussed, I'll try and keep them more concise if it's helpful. You can shoot us an email at yetiwalksintobasecamp@gmail.com. Also follow us on our Patreon. It is free. You can stay up to date whenever we release new episodes. You'll get a little email about it. And whenever we release pictures or other fun things, you'll get that too. But, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, our listeners, and the awesome brands that continue to support us. So we just wanted to give a huge thanks to all of you. Thanks for doing your part and trying to educate yourself and make the place that you have grown up and lived in, our planet, that much better, one day, one step at a time. Whatever trail you're out there hiking, it doesn't matter what trail it is, the PCT, CDT, or if it's just your little footpath in the backyard. Because at the end of the day, we're all just outside walking. Hey everyone, Yeti Legs here. We just wanted to let you know that here at Yeti Walks into Basecamp, we do not use AI for any of our editing, recording, social media, or image generation. Everything is done by hand by our team, and that's how we want it to stay. The use of AI has detrimental effects on our environment, and we want no part of it. So we hope you enjoyed this episode that was hand edited by our team with talent and integrity.